Sherlock Holmes, the Devil's Daughter. This is the 8th game released by Frogwares in their Sherlock Holmes series, before rebooting the timeline, so to speak. And it was released, believe it or not, June 10th, 2016. Later that year, around October, it was released on some of the home consoles like the PS4 and the Xbox One. And actually last year, well, at the time of this recording, April 2022, it got released on the Switch. They did that with some of the later games made in that timeline. And it does have a lot of similar gameplays to the previous game released, Crimes and Punishments, even though Crimes and Punishment comes earlier in the timeline. And this one is it's similar to Crimes and Punishment, in which you have a story with quote minor cases in between the big case. However, the big case this time round involves Sherlock Holmes's adopted daughter, Caitlin. Technically, well, yeah, she was adopted. She was actually willed to Sherlock to take care of her. You see, in Testament of Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock was bequeathed by his enemy, Moriarty, to raise his daughter. And this what shows the respect that Sherlock well, this is sort of the respect that Moriarty had for Sherlock. I mean, even in the story of The Final Problem, when they both, quote, supposedly died, but Sherlock Holmes then survived, Moriarty did allow Sherlock to write a note to Watson. It was the gentlemanly thing to do, you know. And while Moriarty was a master criminal, if anyone he felt had the intellect to raise his daughter, it was definitely going to be Sherlock Holmes. Of course, it could have been some sort of master plan, too, like a backup plan in case he failed. However, we have a situation in which we get some cases. And, of course, we have a new neighbor, Alice, and, of course, Caitlin comes home from boarding school, in which she gets Watson's room. Watson is, of course, married at this point. But there's also a underlying theme in each of the stories that we deal with. There's always a parent-child situation in these stories. The first one involves a child who has been, quote, provided for, but he's not a rich child, but his father was in the war, or in the armed forces, I should say. And he's left the child alone, but was able to provide for himself for a few days, a few weeks. Apparently, he's done some investigating of his own. And the child comes to Sherlock looking for his father, asking for help finding his father, which Sherlock gladly takes on the case. And he tries to protect Katie from this. We have also Sherlock reacting to typical father of a daughter situations. I mean, at one point during this case, Caitlin asks about Wiggins. She fancies him a little. Of course, Sherlock's being your typical. But he also doesn't necessarily, he has suspicions about this new neighbor, Alice. Especially as she also starts taking a shine to Caitlin, and it seems the same with Caitlin. But as Sherlock investigates this case, which is actually what we opened the story on, in the middle of the case, when we have a flashback, Sherlock ends up investigating and finding out that what we've got here is a rather wealthy man who is right now, he has been stricken by consumption, tuberculosis, which back in that day was very dangerous. It's still dangerous today, but not as much as it was back then. To which Sherlock finds out that these rich men who have this society to help the poor, they're hunting down, they are basically looking for people to hunt. Cull the herd. Needless to say, the father of the boy, who was marred in the war and marred in the services of Her Majesty, military duty, marred. He is obviously taking exception at this, was giving these men a taste of their own medicine. Sherlock, of course, you make the choice when you piece everything together, including where they've gone, the reasons, and all that. The father figured he wasn't coming back from this, which is why he provided his child in the way he had. We also find out everything else. Some of these people that went missing is actually people he knew in the neighborhood. So obviously he's going to, avenge these deaths. And of course, Sherlock says, of course, this guy needs to be. And we end up having to, we're left with a moral choice in the end. Do we let him kill the man? Do we let him die? We have to make these moral choices. Of course, we can also save the guy's life, so he died, his waning days, he's tried for murder and dies in disgrace. The next one is A Study in Green, in which we actually open it with something rather nice. Sherlock's taking part in a bowling tournament. Lawn bowling. Or bocce ball, or whatever you want to call it. Of course, you don't have to win the competition. It doesn't really change the outcome of what's going to happen. But once you win, or not win, of course, the awards are going to be given the next day. The award is an Aztec calendar, an actual Aztec calendar. This is suspicious. Well, somewhat suspicious. It's not overly suspicious until the following day when Sherlock actually goes for the ceremony and finds there's a murder. Lestrade can almost can't believe it. Of all the dumb luck. Of course, also during this time, during this case, we have a conversation with Alice, which worries Holmes a little. He's still suspicious of her. But as we investigate the case more and all that, here we find out that the people that are being targeted are actually they were part of an expedition into over into Mexico and the Aztec part of the world. Was it Peru or one of those? Yeah, I think it's actually a Mexico area. But we find out that the people being attacked were all part of this this expedition, where one of their group was apparently lost. We also find out that the club is in financial dire straits financially. And that the leader has been selling some stuff on the black market or than that. However, what we have, but the ultimate end, we find out that the person they thought was dead survived. And we find out he's now living under a different name. And, ironically enough, he also has a young ward. He is also not necessarily long for the world, so to speak. But Holmes is not about to let this man he wants to stop the killings, but he also doesn't want to let this man die in jail. So Holmes basically I believe we convince him to stop the killings, and Holmes lets it go so that he can disappear, but with enough information to, quote, help or possibly point Lestrade into looking into other issues. We then move on to the part called infamy. And infamy is different because it actually has a little homage to one of the classic cases of Sherlock Holmes, a case of identity. But also at the same time, Sherlock is being, quote, followed by an actor who wishes to get the part of Sherlock Holmes down perfectly. So he wants to, quote, study Sherlock. And probably ends up putting himself more, jumping to conclusions and all that, into a bigger mess than he should be in. Towards the end of but after we, quote, come to the conclusion of the disappearance of Mr. Hoffman Angel, And maybe the actor had a little point. We could have done it with a little bit more tact. Because in this, if you know the story, this is more about a man who has become wealthy because he is, well, let's face it, he enjoys the money that he has gotten from basically marrying into the marrying the mother and taking care of the daughter, because the actual father was left them very well off. But of course, if she were to marry, he loses that income. So he basically pretended to be Mr. Hoffman Angel, disguising himself so he could, quote, pretend to court her, then disappear with the promise that she will never wed. It's despicable. Of course, then we get a bomb thrown into 221B Baker Street, which Sherlock must disarm and now look into. So during this time that the actor is with him, he lets Caitlin stay with his new neighbor Alice. He also investigates Alice and finds out that there is something totally off with her. She's got a whole area, quote, reveal, tied to a seance, and she is actually the daughter of someone he put away. Of course, as the case goes on, we find out that a child of another person that was affected by Holmes got coerced into doing this, with threats of having his sister being put into brothel work. And of course, as Sherlock Holmes goes to investigate, and we get some progress, of course, the actor causes some mistakes. One might even think that he's actually hindering the investigation, maybe even working for the people at fault. Sherlock, of course, would probably nix this idea. While it's possible, it's probably not correct. I think it's more of a bumbler. Which even leads to Sherlock, quote, rescuing the captured actor and revealing the plot. After that, we have a little story that's called Chain Reaction, which really does involve piecing things together in a greater scale than Sherlock has before. It opens on an accident scene, as Sherlock and Watson are coming back to Baker Street. And Watson is basically trying to get Holmes to tell Caitlin about her past, which Holmes is not too thrilled with, but he can't knock that it would be beneficial. It would probably be best. And lo and behold, what happens? Well, we get into an accident, which has caused several injuries and some that could kill. In fact, you are now working through a whole time sequence of trying to find and take care of people and minimize the loss of life. And as they investigate, we find some people who are at the scene of the crime. But we also, at the scene of the incident, but we also discover that this accident was an accident, but was caused by murder. In fact, the people who were the target of the murder were members of a gang who were robbing a bank. And one of the people involved at the scene was obviously the person who set everything in motion. As our investigation pans out, we find that the one man who literally beat his way out, he knocked out a cop so he could, he promises he'll be back. He's the real culprit. He's the one who, as we find out, is responsible for the murder. You see, he found out about all this and offered to help with this plan. But found out that because his daughter is sick, she just got accepted into a facility in Switzerland that can help her recover. Her mother's dead. That hit very close to home with me because I'm a widower myself, and I can understand why this man did what that he did. You care for your child. I think this is also, after all these cases that somehow involved a child and a parent or a lost parent, gets to Holmes, which now he's going to talk to Caitlin about her past. At the end, however, of course, we're going to, quote, let this man go to tend to his daughter. He's an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary situations, extreme situations, which led him to doing something extreme that he wouldn't normally do. I'm sure Holmes manages to set it up so at least someone who deserves to go to jail should go to jail. However, when it ends, we go back to Baker Street to find Caitlin's missing. Alice has abducted her. And now we must go through a sequence where we must locate Caitlin. She's been taken to a graveyard. She has been taken to which Holmes must find the location. Finds a tomb. An unmarked tomb, which is actually for Moriarty. In which Alice has revealed to Caitlin that she is the daughter of Moriarty, playing on the girl's fragile state at this time. As parents, sometimes we lie to our children. Sometimes we lie to protect them. Sometimes we lie to keep the wonder of youth alive. Caitlin may never have known what her father had done, and I would not be surprised if Moriarty protected Caitlin from what he did, while she was young. We do that. Now she is. Holmes was making sure she went to boarding school because he knew how dangerous his life could be, and he didn't want her hurt. I mean, the bomb and everything. And it comes down to the argument over of nurture versus nature. Holmes finds where Caitlin has been taken to. And even rescues Caitlin from a burning ship. No doubt that Alice had wanted to make Caitlin so distraught and cause Caitlin to take her own life to wound Holmes, even to discredit Holmes. Holmes, in turn, with quick thinking and quick reaction time, manages to save the day and rescue Caitlin. She is raised a Holmes, and she is smart. She's resourceful. And this is the game that ends the original timeline. I will admit there were some things I did not overly care for in this that probably work better in a dual stick controller sense. I mean, there were balancing sections in which you had to keep both two things within their circles, one mouse, one by the WASD keyboard, keys. However, keeping a lot of elements that appeared in prior set, in the previously released game, the mine palace, where we are connecting things together by matching facts together. That's a great thing to keep. The fact that using your imagination and taking the information in, you can reconstruct the events of what happens. That was also brilliant. And I have to admit, ending it with Caitlin finding out the truth, they had some potential to carry this timeline on, in my opinion. This was a good game. I would definitely play it again, maybe after some time. But it's definitely a game that it could serve as a nice ending point for this timeline, and I think it does serve as a nice ending point for this timeline. I would definitely recommend playing this, especially, well, like on consoles like the Switch and the PS4, the bouncing sections aren't as a problem. But it's definitely a must, especially if you love Sherlock Holmes and aren't a quote purist. That's all I'm going to say about Sherlock Holmes and the Devil's Daughter for now. I thank you if you listened to the end. Give this video a like, subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I want you all to have fun. Bye.